الأجيال القادمة مش هتسامحنا لو أغفلناها، ومش هتسامحنا لو ما كناش حريصين على الحفاظ عليها. من الموضوعات دي موضوع الآثار المصرية. طبعا انتوا فاكرين المتحف في المنيا وعملية النهب اللي حصلت له، وان الدولة استعادت يمكن 10-12 حتة آثار و1000 قطعة ما زالت مفقودة. هل يا ترى فقط المفقود هو اللي راح في هذا المتحف، ولا المفقود موجود في أماكن أخرى راحت من متاحف تانية؟ في مخازن لمتاحف لم تفتح من عشرات السنين، والله أعلم إيه اللي حصل فيها والحاجة بتاعتها راحت فين. في أماكن أثرية بيتم نهبها. في أعقاب ثورة 25 يناير وفي ظل حالة الانفلات الأمني اللي كانت موجودة وقتها، كأن دلوقتي مفيش حالة انفلات أمني، لاحظ عدد من المؤسسات الأمريكية والأوروبية إن في عملية استيلاء على المواقع الأثرية القائمة، وشهدت عمليات بحث وتنقيب. يعني جابوا صور بالأقمار الصناعية شافوا بيها ان في عمليات نهب بتحصل لمواقع أثرية موجودة أو أماكن موجودة. معهد كابيتال Archaeological Institute التابع لجامعة جورج واشنطن سعى لبحث سبل رفع الوعي عند الأطراف المعنية جوه مصر وخارج مصر للحيلولة دون تصاعد أعمال السرقة للآثار في ظل عدم الاستقرار الأمني. مساعي المعهد الأمريكي في 28 مارس 2011 خرج عنها مبادرة نداء لحماية الآثار المصرية، موقع من قبل 70 من خبراء بارزين في علوم الآثار وشخصيات أكاديمية وعلمية وآخرون، بيمثلوا عدد من المعاهد العلمية والجامعات والشركات والمتاحف والشخصيات العامة المهتمة بعلوم الآثار في الولايات المتحدة. بيطالب الحكومة الأمريكية باتخاذ إجراءات فورية، وده بقى المهم، لمنع بيع الآثار المصرية في السوق الأمريكية، ونداءات أخرى للحكومات الغربية لمواجهة المشكلة دي، مشكلة تهريب الآثار عبر الحدود، خاصة من المراكز الدولية المعروفة بالتهريب زي لندن ونيويورك. المجموعة اللي وقعت على النداء كانت تحالف دولي لحماية الآثار المصرية بقيادة جامعة جورج واشنطن، ومشاركة عدد من الجامعات الأمريكية والمؤسسات زي جامعة شيكاغو UCLA ومجموعة السميثسونيان المعروفة بمتاحفها الضخمة في الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية وناشونال جيوغرافيك الشهيرة، وجامعات أوروبية، فضلا عن شخصيات مهتمة بمجال الآثار المصرية. عدد من ممثلي زاروا مصر في الفترة من 16 ل 19 مايو 2011. طبعا الناس هتقعد تقول انت يا عم في ايه واحنا في ايه والبلد بتولع وانت بتكلمنا في الآثار، بس عايز اقول ان البلد ان شاء الله الحرائق اللي موجودة فيها هتطفأ قريبا بإذن الله، ولكن هنفوق على كوارث موجودة وحصلت واحنا مش متنبهين. مش معنى اننا زعلانين من باراك اوباما ولا زعلانين من الاداره الامريكيه معناها ان مفيش امريكان مخلصين مش لمصر، ولكن مخلصين لقضاياهم اللي هم شايفينها من ضمنها التراث الانساني اللي جزء كبير جدا منه موجود على ارض مصر. معايا عبر سكايب السيده ديبورا لير هي رئيس مجلس إدارة وعضو المؤسس للكابيتال أركيولوجيكال انستيتيوت في جامعة جورج واشنطن، وهي أيضا بتترأس يعني منظمة من المنظمات المهمة جدا اللي كان وزير الخزانة الأمريكي هانك بولسون هو مؤسسها، اللي هي بيسموها ثينك تانك، مؤسسة بحثية في جامعة شيكاغو. ديبورا لير كانت بتشتغل قبل كده كمستشار أول لرئيس مجلس إدارة مؤسسة ماريل لينش المالية، وهي أيضا كانت مدير عام للبورصة، بورصة نيويورك، وفي الجزء اللي بيختص به الأسواق الناشئة. يعني هنا مش بنتكلم مع خبيرة آثار، بس بنتكلم عن حد اشتغلت في بوينج، اشتغلت في سوني ميوزك، اشتغلت في اماكن كثيره جدا، وعندها خبرات طويله جدا جمعت الناس دي مع بعضها حبا في تراث الانسانيه، حفاظا على التراث المصري اللي كان في ناس بتخرج تقول نغطيه ونداريه عشان ده كفر. I'm welcoming Ms. Deborah Lehr. How are you doing, Ms. Deborah?
Very well, thank you, and thank you for that very generous introduction.
Thank you for taking the efforts in working on something that should have been in the first place a prime interest for Egyptians, but you have taken the initiative, and I thank you and I thank the entire group that has worked on it. Let me start by asking you, how did the idea come up in the first place?
Well, the reality is the idea came up in the first place because we were inspired by the steps that the Egyptian people took after the revolution in January to protect the Cairo Museum. And we felt that if Egyptians were willing to risk their lives in protecting the sites, that we could try and bring together the archaeological community, and quite honestly, much broader than the archaeological community, the private, the public, and the not-for-profit sectors to try and help.
Right. And accordingly, you've taken the action, and if you look at it back from 2011, when you first started and made the call on the 28th of March 2011, up till today, what have the developments been like?
The situation just continues to deteriorate, and it's very unfortunate that criminals have tried to take advantage of the current situation to attack Egypt's cultural heritage. The museums, the mosques, the churches, the archaeological sites. And the issue for us really is that these sites are the foundation of Egypt's important tourism business. So it's not just that they're attacking Egypt's history, but it's also an economic crime. I mean, we certainly commend the Ministry of Antiquities in their efforts to try and fight this looting at home and abroad, because Egyptian antiquities in the last 2 years have just flooded the international marketplace. But cultural racketeering, which we call the trade in illicit antiquities by organized crime, is a global issue. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry, and so we feel that a global problem really requires a global solution. And so that's why we tried to bring together a coalition that was so broad to see how we could create a public-private partnership to help the Egyptian government in solving this problem.
If I go back to history, and I would remember things like, for example, when the Romans burnt down the Bibliotheca Alexandrina, it was a military action that was been taking place. It was a political situation, but thousands of years later, we look at it and we say, humanity has made a major loss at a time when the politics of the time have gone, and they're completely different politics today. I would like you to tell our audience how our sons and grandsons and granddaughters will be looking at us if we are not going to take this matter seriously in our hands.
That's really an excellent point, because we feel that, you know, this crime is not only stealing history, but it's stealing the economic potential of Egypt and many of the countries that we're trying to work in, because, as I said, this is not just an issue that Egypt is facing. This is a global issue, and these are organized networks that have moved in very systematic ways into what is one of the top 5 global illegal businesses. And the structure of this business is very similar to the types of motivations and structures that we see in the drug trade and the illicit sex trade, and therefore you need to bring together these types of public-private partnerships to fight against it.
And how has the Egyptian authorities, especially the Ministry of Antiquities, been responding to your calls? How cooperative have they been? And please do not try to be extra complimentary to them.
Well, the ministry actually has been very welcoming of these efforts, and we really appreciate what they're trying to do. We also were very realistic, and we realized 2 things. One, obviously, Egypt has been going through a serious transition in the last few years, and we've seen a number of ministers in that position. And having served in government myself, I know what a challenge it is. But also there's limited resources to try and fight some of these efforts. And so it's not just that they're welcoming, which they are, it's trying to pull together the resources, some of which they have, some of which they don't, and are in the hands of others within the Egyptian government to try and help protect these sites.
And how has the U.S. government, for example, responded to you, if you've addressed them at all?
Well, we've briefed the administration on what we've been doing. I think for the administration, the focus has been in other areas of the Egypt-U.S. relationship, not on the cultural heritage side.
But any buts
They've
here?
been understanding, but this is not an area of priority for them.
All right. I mean,
We
you've heard in the past, I'm sure you followed the political scene as well, and you've heard calls that came out from extremist groups that says that we need to bring down monuments or at least cover them because it's a form of being heathen in order to have those monuments put out on display. Has this caused any concern in the Western world, in your opinion?
Well, we certainly have heard those calls, and we've seen that actually happen in other countries. That happened certainly in Afghanistan. So we know that in some cases they have actually acted upon these words. It gives us grave concern, as does the unrest in certain other parts of the Middle East. As I said, this is a global issue, though. We see looting on an organized matter happening in Latin America. We see it happening in China. We're very concerned about the issues in Syria and Libya, and our hope is that as an international coalition and an organization coming together to try and fight these activities, that we can perhaps help bridge some of the gap that we see between the various government initiatives, what's happening within the United Nations and UNESCO and other organizations, and try and be a catalyst to get people focused on some action.
And what would you tell those civilians, those people, normal Egyptian citizens that you have said that you've observed back by the time of the revolution, that they were ready to sacrifice their lives in order to protect the Egyptian museum? What would you tell them at this very moment? How can they be part of this international campaign in order to try and create something that is really concrete on the ground?
We've heard numerous accounts of people risking their lives, quite honestly, at various archaeological sites against even armed gangs to try and fight the antiquities. What we've tried to do is look at very creative solutions. Obviously, we need increased security at most of the sites, but putting that issue aside, we've looked at a broad range of innovative solutions to try and help fight it. One is ultimately job creation and creating economic opportunities through what we call cultural entrepreneurship is a top priority for us. We work with Goldman Sachs, for example, in their 10,000 Women program in Egypt, which supports women entrepreneurs, to see if we can't be creative in providing economic opportunities around these archaeological sites so that there's a vested business interest in protecting them. We are also working on developing children's education programs so that we can teach children how to be responsible stewards of their cultural sites, and so that they understand the economic importance but also the historic importance of protecting those sites and what they can do as individuals. And we found very successfully through some of the partners that we work with, like Sesame Street, National Geographic's children's programs, that when you educate the children, you educate the families. But also we're looking at very simple but significant solutions, such as creation of just a national inventory. And we have the resources, both financial and in terms of the training and the other aspects, software, cameras, computers that go into creating a national inventory. But until there's a national inventory of everything that Egypt has actually excavated, it makes it very difficult to track what has been lost. And this is a particularly important issue when it comes to fighting against some of the sales in the auction houses. We found, and I know that the Ministry of Antiquities has been very active in working with Christie's and Sotheby's and some of the others to try and repatriate some of the looted items. But the burden of proof is always on the Egyptian government to prove that they've been stolen. And that's a very difficult thing to do if they don't have some kind of record.
Any chance for normal people to be in contact with the Capital Archaeological Institute to offer help, to offer funding, to offer support, to discuss things with you? Is this through a website, or it's not possible at all?
Oh, it's absolutely possible, yes. Through our website, we would be delighted. We have one dedicated. We would be delighted to hear suggestions, ideas, and to get information about the looting and the sites and the tips that they have and examples, because we're trying to collect this to share. And one of the main motivations that we have is really to try and raise the profile of the fact that this issue of cultural racketeering is such a big one. Often people haven't heard about it, even though, as I said earlier, it's in one of the top 5 crimes globally, up there with drugs and gun running and the illicit sex trade. It's often not talked about. And so if we can even bring some transparency to the system, we feel that we're making a good start. And this is one of the reasons we really appreciate you thinking of us and including us in this program.
Ms. Deborah Lair, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and please allow us to be continuously in contact with you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you. زي ما شفنا ان الموضوع يبدأ من إعجاب العالم إن المصريين وقفوا بعد ثورة 25 يناير يحموا بأرواحهم المتحف، يحموا بأرواحهم تاريخ مصر. فده خلى العالم يتفاعل. كل ما هنقدم صورة حضارية عن نفسنا للعالم، كل ما هنوصل في النهاية إن العالم يتفاعل معانا لده. كل ما هنقدم صورة غير حضارية، العالم هيفقد إيمانه بينا. الشعب المصري عنده كتير يقدر يقدمه للعالم، على الأقل عن نفسه ولنفسه، وبطبيعة الحال العالم هيتفاعل معاه. اوعوا تفتكروا انه عشان العالم ممكن يكون القائمين عليه من رؤساء للحكومات والدول واخدين اتجاه يعني مضاد لمصالح الشعب، اننا نقف ضد المنظمات والمؤسسات والمواطن العادي اللي موجود في الغرب او في الشرق، اللي بيحب مصر او بيحب ما تعنيه مصر او ما يعنيه تراث مصر.